We're in the middle of the Gospel of Mark, and we'll be for a couple more weeks. And I admit I've kind of enjoyed it a little more than I thought I would. Not that it's just, Mark is, as you know, is not my favorite of all the, not a favorite of all the Gospels, but it has been interesting, and I think we've uncovered some good things in these last few weeks, and hope to continue, especially today. Remember that this whole series is called Simplified, and it is not called Made Easy. Some things, there's a difference between simple and easy. It's simple to know what to do as a country. It's very hard to get 435 congressmen to agree on it. There are things in life that are very simple. Your basement floods, it's very simple to know what to do. You got to get the water out, but it's not easy doing it. And so sometimes life, even the simple life, is not an easy life. There's a difference. Because sometimes, like I said, simple means easy. Other times, simple simply means clear and understandable. And having your way forward made plain. This is a message, when I talk about simple, it means the latter and not the former. I'm reading out of Mark chapter 8. This is the climax. If you read a commentary in the Gospel of Mark, this is the climax of the Gospel of Mark. If you saw it as shape, it's like all of the first 8 chapters are Jesus' miracles and the wonderful things he does and the attracting of crowds. And then there's this passage, and then after that it's all about his upcoming death and then eventually his arrest and trial. So if you think a mountain and the peak is here, the end of chapter 8, this is the climax of the Gospel of Mark. Jesus then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. And that he must be killed and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this, and Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan." He said, "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with his holy angels." This is also a key point in the ministry of Jesus. Up to this point, Jesus had been quite popular. He was the very trendy Jesus, the very cool Jesus. And this person exists. And I think this person still exists today and still draws crowds. I wanted to put a little caption underneath there that says, "I got you, bro," but I thought that'd be taking a bridge too far. This is the God who a lot of us encounter. This is a God that a lot of us encourage for our friends and family. This is the God who is trendy. He's the God who rescues. He's the God who redeems. He's the God that sets us on a new course. It's a God who guides us, the God who answers prayer, and the God who improves life. And all of those things are true. And all those things happen. And all those things should be celebrated. And this is a real and accurate depiction of Jesus. It's also a God, it's also a Jesus that a lot of us, a lot of Christians, stop and we never go past this Jesus Christ. In fact, we go to churches. I wouldn't suggest you do it. You can turn on your TV tonight and you can watch them on certain channels where the Jesus presented is all about the God that answers prayer, all about the God that does miracles, all about the God that delivers you from every problem. And if you just have enough faith, that will always be the answer. Again, this is in its own way a depiction of the very cool, very trendy, very willing to help you overcome every obstacle that you would ever face, Jesus. And it's very real. And I'm happy to talk about this Jesus, because this Jesus does exist and shows up often. This was the Jesus up until that point. This was the Jesus that also told the stories and embarrassed the religious leaders and pointed out their hypocrisy and made fun of, or not, just kind of made sport a little bit of how they had gotten some of the things wrong through the years, and the people kind of enjoyed that. And all that's good. This is the part where the Jesus that they loved became the Jesus that was no longer quite as trendy as they thought he was. And this is also a real person that exists today. But this Jesus is the one that doesn't often draw crowds. In fact, this is the Jesus where often the crowds start to go away. And by the way, when I say crowds, it also meant eventually that's where the disciples all started to go away. They denied Jesus. They scattered when he was arrested. Peter denied him 3 times. Everybody turned and ran. Judas turned him in. This is where everybody starts to be a little less sure about things. See, early on in the grace of Christ, early on in the Christian life, Jesus Christ straightens us out, fills us with purpose, fills us with energy, and sets us on a productive path. And all of that is great. It's also God that sometimes sweeps in and gives us direction and answers prayer and makes our way easier. Then there comes the point, and I think this point happens for all believers, eventually. Christ shows up and tells you, that's great, but I need you to follow my path. And then Jesus becomes not so trendy. Nothing makes Jesus quite less popular as when he steps in and says, I have a different thing for you to do. I have different words for you to say. I have a different reaction for you to do. You want to tell that person off. You want to say these things, but I'm asking you not to do that. The goal of the faith, this is what I'd like to say to my culture, including my church culture. I'm not talking about this local, the greater Christian church culture of 2019. The goal of the faith is not to enable me to reach my goal. The goal of the faith is not to make me better so I can get the next promotion, so I can do whatever thing that I want to do next. One of the things when I teach my New Testament class, I look at the class and I tell them this. I said, when you encounter the Bible, and the Bible sometimes will speak to you and encourage you and lift you up at a low moment of life, and all of that is perfect. That's why we read Scripture. That's why we should read Scripture. And so maybe, after Thanksgiving or after Christmas, some of us will get on a scale and be horrified by what we see, and we'll go, oh my goodness, I have to lose 10 pounds. I have to lose 15, or whatever the case might be. I have to lose that. And then you're in Philippians that night for devotions, and you read, I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. And you go, yes, I can. I can do this. And you can use this for encouragement, momentum, inspiration, and all of that is perfectly fine. As long as we all agree that Philippians is not about weight loss. There's a point in the Christian life where Christianity becomes more than about what it means to me and my next goal that I want to achieve. The question then becomes, at these key points sometimes in life, are we willing to place our lives in the hands of the one who died and then rose again? See, there's a warning and a promise that follows, I think, this basic question. Jesus says, whoever wants to save his own life will eventually lose it. That's a tough thing to hear. What does he mean by that? I think sometimes Jesus asks us to give something up or go a next step. And we go, no, it's too far. I'm in charge here. Sometimes when we dig our heels in, the things we think we're in charge of are the things that end up tripping us up. The things that we are most convinced of our own rightness, righteousness, ability, talent, whatever are the things that eventually get used for our own demise. Some things, the things we fear, are the things that come back around to get us. How many of you have seen maybe the parent who had, I don't know, an upbringing, maybe the parents weren't that involved, and they know that they got involved with some things they shouldn't have got involved with when they were 15 or 16, and they said, let me tell you, that's not going to happen to my kid. And so they, with an iron fist, hold on so tight. The kids at 14, 15, and 16, that ends up, sometimes kids can't breathe, and they end up through their own fear causing a kid who then rebels and ends up doing the exact same things, maybe at age 16 and 17, that they did at 14, 15, and 16, but it's because we're wanting to hold on to control so tight that we end up forcing the very thing we're afraid of. One of the things I had to tell myself early as a parent is I'd like to think, most of the time, that I was a good parent. But I will say this, I had to learn that I'm going to trust the grace of Jesus Christ far more than I'm going to trust my own parenting ability. Jesus goes on and says something else, but the one who loses their life for the sake of Christ will find it. That's a different thing. I've run into so many people in life who said, when I came to Christ, I was planning to do this or be this or live here or do this other thing. And yet, I felt God asking me to do this direction, and so I said yes. Boy, this is where I thought I'd be, and now I'm over here. And then you ask them 30 years later, and they said, oh my goodness, I cannot imagine what my life would have been had I gotten my own goal. This is so much more here. I think that's what this text is talking about. We have no idea what God has in store. Perhaps there's times in life we can trust the one who created us to lead us in the places where we can be effective, where we can be holy. When we cling to our old life, we are in essence keeping a toe in the water. You ever seen like a swim class? Sometimes you get at a community pool, you'll have a swim class to teach 6 and 7-year-olds how to swim or something, maybe 5 or 6-year-olds, and this is how they're going to do it. And you get 25 kids that take all their clothes off, get down to their swim trunks, and then you wonder, gee, I hope little Johnny will take the water. And then there's like always 6 kids, as soon as they take their clothes off, they just run and cannonball. They're in. You go, okay, I guess don't have to worry about them. And then there's the kid that goes, oh, I don't know. And they always dip in the toe all the way around. You go, okay, that kid will never get in the water. When I was young, like up to about age 9 or 10, there was a few years we'd go visit my dad in the summer for a couple weeks. He had a boat, and he kept it in the Ohio River. And we used to go swimming. We'd go out in the boat in the Ohio River, and he'd say, he'd put the anchor down, which usually just slowed down your drift. And he said, let's all jump in. And there was a time, I don't know if I was 7 or 8, he goes, I don't know, Dad, I don't want to, I don't know what's in here. And Dad said, okay, on the count of 3, we'll both jump in, and then we'll race back the boat. See who gets the boat quickest. I went, all right, I'll do it. 1, 2, 3, and I jumped, and he pulled the ladder in. Somehow that's all it took. Then I realized everything was fine. I think sometimes we're always the ones standing on the edge with our toe, unwilling to really trust Jesus Christ with our life. after he gives this warning and a promise, those who cling and refuse to yield to me will end up losing. But those who give their life to me will end up saving it. He doesn't just stop there. He goes on and he says this. He says, what good is it for man to gain the whole world yet forfeit his soul? Or what can a man give in exchange for his soul? I think it's important for all of us. There's a time in life we need to know our own price tag. Let me ask a question. How much does your soul cost? No matter who you talk to, everybody goes, oh, I'll never sell out. And I look around the world that I see, and I see people selling out for almost nothing. They sell it very cheaply. And they sell it at rock bottom, short-term sale prices. I'm not even talking about, let you hear sometimes pastors do about, oh, they sell it now in the light of eternity. I'm not even talking about that. We'll leave that aside. Is it valid? Yes, but that's way too easy. That's not what I'm talking about. I think there's timing to life. When you choose to cling to your claims on life, it's not that you're sacrificing this thing you love for something you don't. Please listen to me here. I'm trying to say this like I want to, and I probably won't. You are sacrificing this thing you love now for some far greater thing in the future that you can't even imagine. It's not a trade between something now for something else now. You're trading something now for something you can't even see. I think of Paul, who was one of the leaders of the Jewish faith. He was probably on the Jewish ruling council. He was highly ambitious. I think he wanted to go all the way to the top. At the moment, his trade was, if I follow Jesus Christ, I give up everything for nothing. In the moment, that was his trade. Had he not been obedient to Jesus Christ, he was trading a position on the Jewish ruling council, and we would have forgotten his name 50 years later. For 2,000 years later, billions of people in the world read his words. He had no idea what the trade was. And often we don't either. Something is being prepared for you, but it will take your surrender to get there. I don't know how else to say it. I've seen people throw away a life of influence and grace over so many worthless things. Scripture has stories full of these. Esau had the birthright. He sold it to his brother for a bowl of stew. Now, I love beef stew. A week or two ago, there was some stuff on sale. Michelle made a big pot of beef stew. In the last week and a half, I've had beef stew 5 times. I love it, but I'm not going to sell my soul over it. King Saul sold his kingdom for some plunder in the battle with the Amalekites. His kingdom. In our day, I've seen people sell their soul for a promotion, fishing, a new boat, travel baseball, etc. In our small group Wednesday night, reading a good book, How to Live a Life of Influence. It's called Ripple Effects. We talked about the story of Esther. Let's go back to the story of Esther. There was no queen, and the king of Persia was looking for a new queen. And someone liked her and kind of groomed her, and she was end up being chosen. Here, a Jewish woman was now queen in the kingdom of Persia for over 5 years. She was just there. And then 5 years later, there was a conspiracy that wanted to kill all the Jews in Persia. And she was there to save her people and kind of uncover it and act in a way that is still remembered to this day in the Jewish nation. When she was being obedient then, nothing happened for 5 years. Nothing. 5 years down the line, she's in the right place at the right time. We do this in other areas of life as well. We save now so we can be secure later. We maintain the relationship in hard times to have the blessings of family later. We put in the time as dad and mom now so that when we're 70, we get to see grandchildren and have the life of family around us then. We put in the time when we start the job in order to get the promotion later. Will we pay the price now for what God is preparing later? In fact, Jesus even said at this time it was more so than our time. He said, you may not have to, but at some point you may have to make a very public decision about whether you will follow me. Because he said in that last verse that we talked about, when he said, if anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him. So many people think that they have very little to offer. And I imagine that it is true today as well. We look around and we see people that are more talented or speak better or look better or whatever we say about the other person. Yesterday, Michelle and I were down. It was her, I almost hate to say this, it was her 35th reunion at college. And there was a woman there, and she gave her testimony. And think about it. Her hair had just started to regrow in. Just a little fuzz. She had breast cancer diagnosis in January. It's been the hardest year of her life. And she got up in front of everybody and talked about her year. I'm sure there were other more talented people. There were more people that had this better or that better. But she just simply shared out of her struggle and made an impact. I look around here and I see so much potential. And you think your life is too compromised by this issue that you have. Oh, I can't say anything because back when I was 18, this happened. Or when I was 25, this happened. Or I used to do this. Or I have this thing that I struggle with. Let me tell you, that might be your entry point into your greatest influence. Because if you think you're the only one that struggles with whatever the thing you struggle with, you are crazy. Everybody struggles. Have you been out there? There's a bunch of crazy people running around out there that need some only slightly less crazy people with Jesus to talk to them. That might be your greatest influence when left in the right hands. And the most capable hands are not your own. The good news is this morning is we can have an impact. The good news is there might be something fantastic out there, but it just might take your surrender. It probably will take your surrender to get there.